This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hello everyone, Shalom Aleichem, Ruchim Abam. Welcome to our Seder in the Orchos Chaim of the Rosh. Sorry for the delay this afternoon. We're up to Ois Pei Gimel. Ois Pei Gimel. Says the Rosh, Al Toitzi Diba V'Lashon Harah Al Shem Beria. Do not emit a report or Lashon Harah on any creation. V'loi lazus sifasayim urachilos, and not any type of improper speech or tale-bearing. Now, this is quite interesting because we're accustomed to thinking that it's permitted to speak Lashon Harah about a Gentile. After all, it says, Lo yselech rachel be'amecha, only somebody among your people. And certainly halachically, according to the letter of the law, it is permitted to speak Lashon Harah about a Gentile. And here the Rosh is saying, do not release a gossip about not only any human being, but any creation. And sure enough, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in his commentary on the Orchos Chaim of the Rosh, by the way, Reb Chaim wrote the Orchos Chaim when he was very young. Reb Chaim wrote his commentary on the Orchos Chaim when he was quite young. He is medayek, he infers from the language of the Rosh that if the Rosh says on any beria, that means even on an inanimate object, like the Gemara in Erechin says, that if the Meraglim spoke Lashon Harah about Eretz Yisrael, which is inanimate, all the more so, Miriam should have learned not to speak Lashon Harah about Moshe Rabbeinu, but the language of the Gemara implies that there is some degree of impropriety speaking Lashon Harah about something, even if it's inanimate. As the Chavos Havavos brings in the Shar HaKniyah, and this is also brought in the Shari Tshuva Rabbeinu Yoina, that a pious individual was walking with his Talmidim, and they encountered a rotting carcass, and the student said how awful this carcass smells, and the Rabbi said, no, but look how white the teeth are. Which indicates, as Rabbeinu Yoina explains, that Lashon Harah is not only problematic because of the harm you do to someone, but it's also a matter of a bad character trait. To hone in on the negativity is a corruptive, corrosive, destructive character trait. In other words, if you see something and it's all good except for the teeth, it doesn't smell good, but the teeth are white, or even if it has just one imperfection, that's a bad midah to hone in on that. Comes Reb Chaim Kanievsky that it could be that when the Rosh says not to speak Lashon Harah even about a guy, he's referring to a medrash in Parashas Pekudei. The medrash says, Im dibarta be'esav shehu achicha soivcha l'daber b'ben umasecha. If you speak gossip about a Gentile, you'll eventually speak gossip about a Jew. In other words, it will train you to do this. Like the Medrash says, Teishev be'achicha tidaber, beven imcha titen doifi. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you train yourself to speak about your brother, who's not the son of your mother, Esav, you'll ultimately come to speak Lashon Harah about Yaakov. Comes the Radal in Rav David Luria in his commentary to the Medrash, and he says, from this Medrash we see, and I never knew this, I always thought it was permitted to speak Lashon Harah about a Gentile. And I believe technically it is. However, the Radal wants to derive from this Medrash, in fact, it is prohibited to speak Lashon Harah about a Gentile. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, no, that is not halachically normative, a normative position. There's no biblical isser, because it says, Lo yselech rachel be'amecha, but it could be an isser derabanan, a rabbinic isser. And in fact, with Nissen Karelitz, by the way, I just saw today that the Stipler told Reb Chaim that Reb Nissen Karelitz is the Rav of their family. He paskins that it's a rabbinic isser to speak Lashon Harah about a Gentile, lest you come to speak Lashon Harah about a Jew. But then Rabbi Nissen Karelitz says that's only a Gentile that keeps the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So now you could sort of breathe a sigh of relief, because Gentiles today are not considered to observe the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, because even if technically they fulfill those laws, but part of keeping the Shem Mitzvahs B'nei is if they do so because they believe that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people and He instructed the Jewish people to teach the Gentiles the 7 Noachide laws. And in any event, the language of the Medrash implies that even if the Gentile does not keep the 7 Noachide laws, it's still not proper. And the Nitziv learns that when the Medrash says that if you come to speak Lashon Hara about Achicha Shebein Umasecha, that means the Medrash is not saying you know how to speak Lashon Hara about a guy, it's talking about a ger, a convert. But again, the language of the Medrash Tanchuma, that says if you're going to speak about Esav, you'll eventually speak about Yaakov, does not imply that. Unless we say, we could add, that the Ramban tells us in Masechta Kedushin that Esav was technically Jewish. His mother was Jewish. It's just he was a Yisrael Mumar. So maybe only there's an Isser D'Rabbanan to speak about a Yisrael Mumar, but not a Gentile. Okay, and then the Rosh, the bottom line is, the Rosh is saying at least, not to speak Lashon Hara about not only a Gentile, but an inanimate object. As we mentioned before, the Rosh wrote this commentary for himself and not for anybody else, meaning these are pious practices adopted by the Rosh, obviously, that we should aspire to and we should try to adopt, but it doesn't mean that it's outright halacha. Let us see further. Then the Rosh says that don't speak lazus fasayim and rechilas. The Reb Chaim Kanievsky refers to the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis that Rav would give malchus to somebody who was moitzi laz. Moitzi laz means to start. He started challenging, impugning a particular get. Now, what is this adding over Lashon Hara? How is laz different than Lashon Hara? The Tosfos Yom Tov in his translation explains the difference between Lashon Hara and laz, that diba refers to a false report, and lazus vasayim refers to words of machlokes. Okay, let's move on to Ois Pei Daled. Al tihi nivhal lahashiv ba'azos. Do not be hasty to respond with audacity, with brazenness, l'misha amar dvar shaloi tovim, to someone who says things that are not good. What does this refer to? Rabbi Cheskel Sarna explains, if somebody speaks to you in a very harsh manner, and very improperly, in a very insulting way, don't be hasty to respond, even though perhaps he deserves it. It was completely uncalled for what the person said. They really ashamed you, put you down, and they're really deserving of a nasty response. Don't be hasty to respond that way. Why? Not for him, for you. Because you don't want to ingrain within yourself the midah of azos. Similar to what the Ramah begins Orach Chaim with, the Ramah says, don't be embarrassed from people who mock you in Avodas Hashem. However, the Mishnah Berurah adds, but don't fight with them because the midah of azos is very despicable, and it should not be utilized because you don't want to acquire that midah. That is the way the Mishnah Berurah explains it. However, the Bir Halacha does tell us that this is talking about a private practice that a person has and people are mocking you, so basically you should remain humble and not respond in kind. However, if those who are challenging you are challenging observance in general, and it may cause a rifyon, a weakness in the community's observance, then, so to speak, it is called for to summon up the midah of azos, even though it's a very dangerous midah, and we're afraid of acquiring such a midah, but the word midah means a measurement, and sometimes ingredients which are not normally used and not normally employed, sometimes they're called for in limited circumstances. Okay, we'll hold it over here. Bez Hashem, we'll pick it up tomorrow in Ois Pei Hei. In Ois Pei Hei, we're going to learn about not screaming. Or we're talking about even when the windows are closed and the door is shut, Because first of all, your house has speakers, and people are going to hear, and it's going to get out. And in general, it's not an appropriate way to speak. And the Rosh is going to speak. Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn about the decibel, the volume one should use when speaking. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. Wish you all bracha vehatzlacha and kol tov. Have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.